Dobar dan svima. Ako može polako da se namestimo svi da bi počeli. Moje ime Petar Todorov, ja sam historičar, radim u Institutu za nacionalnu istoriju Skoplja. Ovaj panel je u suštini prezentacija jednog projekta, ERC, European Research Council funded projekat, čija je kraćenica MACAUTH i koja se odnosi jedno veoma važno pitanje za jedan dobar deo Balkana, odnosno jugoistočne Evrope. Ja ću ovu najavu napraviti na našem jeziku, kako kažemo, ali u suštini ceo panel će biti na engleskom jeziku sa naše strane, a onda možemo mi primati pitanje na bilo koji jezik. Tako da, spremni smo znači za sve jezike. Ovo što bi ja dao sam uvodnu reč, a onda će glavni istraživač projekta, kolega Tasos Kostopoulos, prezentirati više o samom projektu, nakon čega će kolega iz Sofije, Aleksandar Vezenkov, pričati dati bugarsku perspektivu na pitanje koje mi radimo, da bi ja onda nastavio i pričati više o makedonskoj, isto tako i jugoslovenskoj perspektivi ovog makedonskog pitanja. I na kraju će Tasos reći bilo više i o prvoj knjizi projekta, koja treba da izađe čas skorije ovog leta. Ono što je isto važno pomenuti, ovo nije prvi rat ili prva saradnja između istoričara iz Makedonije, Grčke i Bugarske, no je interesantno pomenuti da je možda prvi, ja mislim da je prvi projekat u kome grčka akademska institucija i makedonska akademska institucija zajedno surađivaju. I to baš na pitanje koje je dosta podijelilo te dve države, ono poznato ime, pitanje oko imena države. Tako da ja ću sad dati reći kolegi Tasosu da on malo više objasni o samom projektu. Tasos.
Okay. Thanks a lot for the organizers for this invitation and for Petar especially for his suggestion that we come and discuss this issue. I shall speak in English because I can somehow understand the Serbo-Croatian, Bosnian language, but I cannot speak at all. MACAUTH, Screen South, Building Nations, Macedonia as a laboratory for Balkan-wide authoritarianism, a research project hosted by the Rethymnon-based Institute for Mediterranean Studies and supported by a grant by the European Research Council, with the North Macedonian Institute for National History and the Irish Maynooth University as partners, investigates a little explored and usually neglected aspect of the Macedonian question throughout the late 19th and most of the 20th century. Namely, the function of Macedonia and the Macedonian question as a catalyst and a testing ground for the emergence, development and consolidation of the deep state and authoritarian state policies on a nationwide scale, not just for Macedonia, throughout the Balkans. In other words, how the tools used by the rival nation states to extract national loyalty in late Ottoman Macedonia were subsequently transformed into a far broader method of social and political control. Deep state is a Greek and Turkish neologism gradually adopted by other Balkan and non-Balkan languages too, denoting the nexus which linked the hardcore of the state apparatus, military, security services, intelligence, plus a faction of the civilian administration and judicial authorities, with various kinds of nationalist formations, espousing and promoting a strong-arm repression of internal enemies that bypassed and eventually undermined the rules of an ostensibly liberal constitutional democracy. In the case of Greece, there is strong evidence that such a deep state first emerged after the 1893 default of the Greek foreign debt, mostly as an endeavor of self-protection by the officer corps, widely considered at the time as responsible for the country's bankruptcy, as it was one of the main recipients of public funds at the time. And this deep state was consolidated during the early 1900s by the counterinsurgency warfare waged by Greek armed bands in Ottoman Macedonia. Undergoing various mutations, it became a crucial factor in Greek politics until the downfall of the colonialist junta in 1974. The extent of its vestiges constitutes a topic of public debate still. In Turkey, it is still a factor to be counted on. The rest of the Balkans experienced, as you all know, a similar phenomenon up to World War II. Its transformation, partial survival and adoption or re-emergence under the region's communist regimes, despite the socio-political and institutional breakthrough operated after 1944, remains an open question. Why the Macedonian question played such a role? Contrary to what is generally believed, this question was not primarily one of ethnic feuds, ancient hatreds, and irrational passions, but mainly a question of loyalty extraction and identity building, based on both pre-existing ethno-linguistic identities and an array of material contradictions and rational arguments about the prospects of the respective individuals or communities. As the same population groups faced and instrumentalized for their own reasons and the possibility or dilemma of choosing between various mutually exclusive national projects and identities, nation was widely conceived by all sides and actors not as the eternal primordial entity usually envisaged by nationalist theories, but first and foremost as a political party, a Greek party, a Bulgarian party, a Serbian party, later also a Macedonian one, whose emergence and development had been closely interwoven with social antagonism at the local level and subsequent patterns of political domination. National party cleavages followed the usual lines of political antagonism, with a central core of local leaders and firm followers, an outer layer of less dedicated but usually loyal adherents, and a fluctuating peripheral clientele always suspected of changing sides under minimal pressure or due to material, personal, or any other kind of motives. An essential community can thus be detected between the goals and practices of the rival Balkan states in Macedonia, from irredentism to assimilation strategies, and their internal policies concerning loyalty, enforcement, and identity building among citizenry in general, not just in Macedonia. On the basis of this discovery, the MACAUTH research team focuses on the impact of the Macedonian question on the internal life of the Balkan nation states, exploring the specific mechanisms that have shaped a particular modality of national consciousness, as well as the interplay between national and social in the perception and repression of internal enemies. We investigate 4 axes of research, hitherto totally unexplored or bypassed. First, the bureaucratic screening and taxonomy of collective or individual identities and its effects in the lives and self-perception of ordinary citizens. An eloquent case study is the genealogy of the infamous Certificate of Healthy Social Beliefs, πιστοποιητικών υγιών κοινωνικών φρονημάτων, provided by the Greek Security Police, an official document that was enacted under the Metaxas dictatorship of the late 30s and was considered an indispensable prerequisite for the exercise of a vast array of civil rights, or to successfully carry out a large number of economic transactions. An institution, in other words, which provided the cornerstone of the elaborate system of socio-political control imposed in Greece until the 1970s. In fact, this certificate was nothing but an extended version of the far less known Certificate of National Beliefs, πιστοποιητικών εθνικών φρονημάτων, that had been issued by various instances of the Greek party in Macedonia at the turn of the century. Diplomatic and security apparatus, and in order to monitor and regulate by force the national identities of non-Greek speaking Orthodox Macedonians. were they either immigrants in Greece, seasonal, settled, or prospective, or just the inhabitants of a place marauded by nationalist armed bands. Similar forms of such certificates were issued at one time or another by most Balkan states. Here we see an array of them that have come out of the MACAUTH project, either through their security services or through nationalist organizations that had been accordingly authorized. For example, in Romania, for the settlers from the Vlach settlers from Macedonia, such certificates were issued by the Macedonian Association. The second topic that we study is paramilitarism, is far known than the earlier one, and state-sponsored political violence as a method of rule that was transplanted from Macedonia to the core political life of the Balkan countries. For example, in the Turkish case, the Armenian genocide and the ethnic cleansing of other Christian minorities was carried out by officers and security people who had been trained for this job during the Macedonian campaigns of counterinsurgency. The third topic is the transfer of these practices, mostly of surveillance and monitoring and less by violence, to the diaspora, for the remote political control of emigrants and how this backfired into far-right nationalist agendas projected or even imposed by the diasporas to their countries of origin. Last but not least, we also investigate the ideological justification of such practices in the name of national expediency and how this has come out in a larger or minor degree from the Macedonian question. The Macedonian research team is composed of 15 postdoctoral or senior researchers and 2 PhD students from Greece, Bulgaria, North Macedonia, Serbia, Romania, and France, including 4 specialists on the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Republic, and Albania. Here we see the list. There are also 2 new members that have not been recorded. The project's methodology combines extensive archival research in 7 Balkan countries, in Western Europe and overseas, that is USA, Canada, and Australia, a survey of the national and local press, collection of the relevant legislation on the screening and classification of the citizens' national cum social beliefs, as well as the compilation of an electronic database that is going to be public after the project's end. Focus is on both the micro and the micro level, looking for at the same time and aiming to explain the eventual common patterns and divergent variants between different countries. The findings of our research have been up to now presented and thoroughly discussed in 3 workshops. The first one was held in 2023 in Rethymnon as a kick-off venue. The second one took place in 2024 in Skopje and was dedicated to the study of taxonomic systems and practices. The third workshop was held in 2023 in Belgrade and dealt with paramilitarism and state-sponsored political violence. A 4th workshop has been scheduled for the next September in Istanbul, co-organized by the Koç University Research Center for Anatolian Civilizations, ANAMED, and the German-run Orient Institute. It will be dedicated to the topic of the diaspora and the diasporic politics of surveillance, identity screening, and repression. An international conference will finally take place after a Nobel Call for Papers in May 2027 in Rethymnon. Last but not least, the findings of our collective research will be disseminated to the rest of our colleagues, as well to the broader public, through a number of open access articles and at least 4 monographies or thematic collective volumes, the first of which is now under print. Unfortunately, we did not manage to have it in time to present it here as a book. Under the title Taxonomies of Loyalty, Identity Screening as a Tool for Socio-Political Control, National Building and Cleansing in the Balkans and Anatolia, it contains 12 contributions, and we shall present it later. Now I pass the floor to Alexander Vezenkov from Bulgaria.
Thank you very much. I'll present the Bulgarian case, and I'm sad to admit it, but the project is highly relevant to the current Bulgarian context given the obstacles Bulgaria has imposed on the Republic of Macedonia accession process to the European Union. These obstacles reflect a clear double standard. Rights are demanded for those who self-identify as Bulgarians in Macedonian, while the rights of those who self-identify as Macedonians in Bulgaria are systematically restricted. Attempts are made to impose the Bulgarian interpretation of the history of Macedonia in the so-called historical dispute. From outside, this appears as a classic example of irrational bullying, but at the same time, the issue is exploited domestically to mobilize the public opinion on a much broader scale in order to overshadow other problems. For instance, a reformist government was ousted in August 2022 on charges of betraying Bulgarian interests in Macedonia, and under this pretext, reforms in a number of other areas were blocked. In today's governing formation, as has been the case several times in recent decades, we see representatives of a small party called IMRO, International Macedonian Revolutionary Organization. It was established in the late 1980s using the old ill-famous name under the control of the state security at the time, and today is still led by someone who collaborated with both the communist and post-communist secret services. IMRO is by no means the only channel through which the deep state influences the country's governance. It's merely a symptom of a persistent continuity. At the same time, the national media covered the Macedonian question extensively in line with official positions. All of this suggests that the conflict with the Republic of Macedonia will continue alongside the ongoing ideological and political stagnation in the country. In addition, the historical dispute with Macedonia has led to a hardening of positions on a number of other issues concerning the recent past, particularly those related to crimes committed during the two world wars. The stance on the Macedonian issue taken by mainstream Bulgarian historians, as well as other social scientists, isolates them from the international academic community and makes them distrust contemporary approaches in social sciences. Still, what is essential for our project is that such uses of the Macedonian question have constantly appeared, albeit in different ways, throughout the country's modern political history from the late 19th century till the present day. First and foremost, we must situate the Bulgarian case within the context of other countries under consideration. Similarly to Greece and Serbia till the Balkan Wars, Bulgaria too initially considered Macedonia an irredentist project. The focus was on winning the loyalty of the population still living in the Ottoman Empire, whether through the activities of the Bulgarian Exarchate and the schools it controlled, or by attracting young people to study and serve in Bulgaria, as well as by preparing for the annexation of the region by military force. For all three countries, following the partition of Macedonia after the Balkan Wars, arose another question, namely of integrating the respective annexed territory and its population into the national space. What is characteristic of the Bulgaria's case is that after 1913, irredentist ambitions remained much more pronounced. This is entirely understandable for the elites of a country that believed it had not obtained enough territories, given that they wanted the whole of Macedonia. In the end, the attempts to win over the Macedonians living in the neighboring countries to the Bulgarian cause were unsuccessful, but the Macedonian question was still used by nationalist groups and circles in the country. As for the policy of integration and homogenization, the approach in Bulgaria as a mono-ethnic state was much more rigid than in multi-ethnic Yugoslavia, where more flexible approaches were favored. Following a very brief period of recognition of Macedonian national identity, mainly during the years 1944-48, the policy in socialist Bulgaria was radically different from that in socialist Yugoslavia and consisted of mere imposition of Bulgarian identity to the population in the Pyrenean region. Second, with regards to the policy of forcibly homogenizing the national space, I must emphasize that the Macedonian issue was not the only one around which nationalist circles and the deep state were mobilizing. Another issue that largely fueled authoritarian tendencies was the high proportion of Turks and Muslims in the nation state. Bulgaria is a country known for its highly restrictive policy toward the non-Bulgarian identity, with the forced assimilation and forced emigration of Turks and more generally Muslims at the center of these policies. I note this not only to acknowledge the role of this factor alongside the Macedonian question, but also because the two are interlinked. For instance, a 1980 report to the Politburo complained, I quote, that Yugoslav propaganda was increasingly exploiting the Macedonian issue of the Bulgarian Turks for its own interests by linking them to the so-called Macedonian question. In reality, the connection was quite direct. The policy of unifying the national space with regard to peer in Macedonia clashed not only with the self-identification of Macedonians in the region, but also with the mixed character of the population. That is to say, the problem for the communist regime was, and for Bulgaria in general, was not only Macedonian identity, but also the identity of Slavic-speaking Muslims in the Bulgarian part of Macedonia. Most of them identify as Pomaks or Muslims. In this part of the country, actually many self-identify as Turks, while the Bulgarian authorities prefer to call them Bulgarian Muslims or directly Bulgarians. Measures to force the assimilation of Muslims have persisted throughout the region's history since the Balkan Wars. Some events have become notorious, most notably those in the village of Ribnovo in 1964 and Kornica 1973, and the brutality of these events has surpassed what was experienced by people with a Macedonian identity. The pressure went through various phases, starting with forced conversion of Muslims during the Balkan Wars. Then from the late 1930s onwards, the pressure was to adopt Bulgarian names, which a pressure that does not affect religion, but starting from the 1950s, this was exacerbated by the sharp restriction of religious practices under the atheist policy of the communist regime, and finally it was followed by the brutal imposition of Bulgarian names, first on Slavic-speaking Muslims and Roma, and finally on Turks. As a result, according to the 1975 census, over 99% of the residents in the Blagoevgrad county, so the Bulgarian part of Macedonia, were recorded as ethnic Bulgarians. By comparison, according to the latest census of 2021, Orthodox Christians made up about 70% of the population, while 85% self-identified as Bulgarians or were identified as such by census takers. Third, I think it is essential to highlight the various approaches in the attempts to effectively assimilate and homogenize the population of the Bulgarian part of Macedonia, going beyond the usual dichotomy of communist and pre-communist period. The interwar period shows us how the political right and the deep state could use the Macedonian organization not only as a potential lever for pressure against the neighbors, but also as an ally in the struggle against the left in the region and beyond. The Bulgarian part of Macedonia was left under the control of Fimro as a sort of a state within the state during the period 1923-34. After 34, however, following the ban on Imro, the Macedonian question became the monopoly of state institutions. They persecuted left-wing activists in the Macedonian movement as communists, while exerting measured pressure on the rightist elements to bring them into the service of the Bulgarian state. Under the communist regime, initially purely political criteria were emphasized. Following the Tito-Stalin split in 1948, the focus shifted toward real and alleged ties with Yugoslavia, a country that had been accused of revisionism and of refusing to build socialism while developing ties with the West. Such accusations were deemed sufficient grounds for persecuting unreliable elements in the Bulgarian part of Macedonia and beyond. However, these arguments lost their persuasiveness as broader and broader circles of the population dreamed of opening up to the West or were simply impressed by Yugoslavia's higher living standards. Consequently, from the mid-1950s onwards, Bulgarian authorities primarily relied on nationalist arguments and propaganda, and that continues till the present day. Ultimately, it is important to consider the full range of tools for exerting influence, not just direct police measures, bans, and sheer propaganda. Actually, repressive measures in the Bulgarian part of Macedonia were relatively severe, also due to its border location. Alongside this, still, the state implemented a developmentalist project, increasingly redistributing resources to achieve purely political goals, and increased investment in the region with non-Bulgarian population obviously aimed to fully integrate and assimilate their inhabitants. These measures affected the border regions first. The regime in Sofia was concerned with the NATO member state on the south, and after the split of 48, also with Yugoslavia to the west. Some purely administrative measures were put in place, such as expelling people from the border regions, people who were not reliable in the eyes of the communist authorities, including former IMRO activists, Muslims, etc. At the same time, the authorities sought to rehabilitate the border areas economically. In 1951, they granted tax concessions and reduced deliveries to the state in the districts alongside the southern and the western border. They also took measures to improve food supply in these areas. Another priority was the electrification of border areas, partly to be used as a propaganda tool among the local population, which in the case of the western border was exposed to what authorities at that time called hostile Titoist propaganda. Starting in the 1960s, and especially in the 70s and 80s, official publications in Bulgaria simply avoided references to national minorities and instead implicitly referred only to administrative units inhabited by these minorities. Thus, the policy on the Pomaks usually referred to the Smolensk county, and the policy on the Turkish minority referred at first place to the counties of Kırcaali and Shumen. From 1963 onward, policies aimed at erasing Macedonian national identity, respectively at preventing its formation among younger generations, were directed at Blagoevgrad County and aimed at accelerating its economic development. Government decrees of the 60s and 70s, without explicitly mentioning Macedonian identity, included a series of measures for the establishment of industrial enterprises, the expansion of energy capacity, the development of agriculture and forestry, as well as the development of public services. Additionally, investment were directed toward urban development, primarily in the administrative center of Blagoevgrad, but also in most other towns, especially Sandanski and Razlog. Investment in urban renewal notably included also the restoration of historic districts of these towns, such as the Varosha neighborhood in Blagoevgrad, and in some cases, entire towns were transformed into museum towns, like Bansko and Melnik. Thus, urban renewal and improvement went hand in hand with the sacralization and glorification of the national past. Paradoxically, the restoration of old Greek churches and traditional Turkish houses was intended to demonstrate the Bulgarian character of the region and its inhabitants. It's worth highlighting also the focus on the educational system as a mechanism for assimilation. In 1943, the Bulgarian occupation authorities used an existing high school building in Skopje to establish an educational institution which they named the University of Skopje. In reality, it offered instruction in only 3 fields of studies: Slavic philology, history, and geography, that is, the disciplines directly aligned with the regime's aim to propagate its own version of the national language, national past, and national territory. At that time, there was no such university in any major Bulgarian city outside the capital. Under entirely different conditions, but with similar motives, a branch of the Sofia University for training of kindergarten and elementary school teachers began operating in Blagoevgrad in 1976 and was transformed into an independent higher pedagogical institute a couple of years later, once again ahead of a number of larger cities. In sum, our aim is to cover the full spectrum of authoritarian practices, taking into account changes over time and the state's expanding capacity for control and influence. Furthermore, it is important for us to compare these processes across the countries in the region in contrast to traditional national historiographies, which tend to examine only their own case in isolation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. Now, I would like to present what is the Macedonian, socialist Macedonian perspective, but also Yugoslav perspective of the Macedonian question. I mean, when we discuss about the presentation of our project, we decided that we do in this format, me, Tasos, and Alexander, so that we are coming from countries that today are the geographical region of Macedonia today is incorporated in these three countries. Our team of researchers includes also people, researchers and colleagues from other countries, from Serbia, of course, but also from countries that are far from the Balkans, like Alexander Tumarkin from France. But what we wanted to do is just to present this because all these parts of Macedonia or the Pirin region in Bulgaria or how it is called today in Macedonian historiography, the Aegean and the Vardar Macedonia, or the Greek Macedonia, and what is today North Macedonia, are cooperating, and we wanted to point out these perspectives. And concerning the socialist Macedonia or Yugoslavia, I would like to underline two main points. The first is this project also, this research on the Macedonian question and how it is instrumentalized by authoritarian regimes for their own political legitimization, it also can help us to understand the Macedonian nation building process. That started in institutional development of the Macedonian national identity that started in 1944. And the second, and speaking about this point, the Macedonian question is interpreted as a part of this historical and century-long struggle for statehood of the Macedonian people, and it was one of the principal sources of political legitimization for the Communist Party in socialist Macedonia, and the authorities in the socialist Macedonia, and it was both used domestically and also abroad among the members of the Macedonian immigrant communities. And this was particularly evident in relation to immigrants, and especially the refugees from the Greek Civil War, who settled in Australia, Canada, in Europe, in the United States, in many countries in the world. Speaking about the home, about the domestic aspect, the Macedonian question is really an inevitable component of the nation-building process, as I said, and of the broader political project that was pursued by the authorities, and the development of the national historiography that created constructed the national historical narrative and memory, the Macedonian national historical narrative and memory. So the primarily many scholars agree actually that one of the objects, the primary goal of the Macedonian national historiography is to write this national history and to demonstrate also the historical continuity of the Macedonian people, and also at the same time to claim this distinctiveness of the Macedonians from the neighbors, from the Greeks, Serbs, and Bulgarians. And at the same time, there is also one very interesting line, which I will give you an example, also to oppose the national thesis coming from Bulgaria and from Greece. For example, it is very interesting that the first approaches to how Macedonian state, actually, socialist Macedonia, dealt with the question of ancient history or the history of ancient Macedonia was to say that, okay, we are not ancient Macedonians, but they are not Greeks, you know. So this was just to reject the Greek national idea, the interpretation that the ancient Macedonians are Greek, in order to claim that this the geographical region of Macedonia is actually Macedonian, so to nationalize the area. And this very much reflected how they addressed later the immigrant communities. Later on, yes, the question of ancient Macedonia became an official policy, and the interpretation included claiming direct continuity with between ancient Macedonians and modern Macedonians. So, in short, from 1944, 1945 onward, through a variety of political, educational, cultural, and scholarly policies, socialist Macedonia actually joined the broader struggle to shape the national consciousness of the Macedonian population, or the struggle for the souls of the people. And this is particularly visible when it comes to to immigration, and because this really the nation building process in Socialist Macedonia also possesses a significant transnational dimension. So the authorities in Socialist Macedonia, they sought to shape immigrant communities in accordance with their political and ideological visions. So by creating a viable immigration that will support Socialist Macedonia as a constituent republic of Yugoslavia, and to promote its understanding of Macedonian ethno-national identity and its history and culture. And for this reason, the Socialist Macedonia developed a comprehensive program for engagement with immigrant communities. Various institutions and individuals were mobilized with the objective of creating a Macedonian immigration, or more broadly, a transnational community of Macedonians that were loyal to Socialist Macedonia and, of course, to align with its political and ideological goals. And it became an integral component, as I said, of the Macedonian nation building project. And the institutions involved in this political and national undertaking operated under the supervision of the principal political and ideological center, that was the Communist Party, or the League of Communists of Macedonia. And they controlled the entire process, and they implemented this policy through different institutions like Matica of the immigrants from Macedonia, the Macedonian Orthodox Church, which is a very, very interesting question to discuss. How Macedonian Orthodox Church as a modus operandi played a very important role in this process. And particularly efforts were directed towards incorporating, as they're called, the Aegeitsi, or the Aegean Macedonians, who were either refugees from the Greek Civil War, but also people who left Greek Macedonia or Aegean Macedonia before the Second World War, or after the Greek Civil War. And this is very interesting because Socialist Macedonia aligned really with this need of integrating Aegean Macedonians, and actually shaped the policy, not only domestic policy, but also international policy of Yugoslavia. And so through the creation of this viable immigrant community of Macedonians, who were conceived as an inseparable part of the Macedonian people, really the party state, actually, as we refer sometimes, they established an important socio-political factor that became intertwined with both domestic and foreign policy. And actually its influence continues to shape political development in contemporary North Macedonia, and as well as the country's relation with Bulgaria and Greece. For example, for Socialist Macedonia to recognize an immigrant community, immigrant organization as loyal, that organization will have to accept several important political positions. And they also included that they will also accept the Socialist Macedonian policy towards the question of the Macedonian minority in Greece or Bulgaria, or, for example, to recognize Macedonian Orthodox Church. And not to mention that slowly by the end of the 70s, the Aegean Macedonians were actually incorporated into this transnational community by more and more incorporating the narrative of ancient Macedonians into the national historical narrative, because they faced serious problems of divisions between Macedonians originating from Yugoslavia and Macedonians originating from Greece, who were divided online on historical interpretation, but also because of the different political experience that they witnessed. So they really adopted this policy and narratives in order to integrate them, and actually became an active participant in the problem that between Yugoslavia and Greece, and later between the independent Republic of Macedonia and Greece, or better known by the so-called name issue, the name dispute. The second point is this Yugoslav context. that is why is important this for Yugoslav history. Usually this history is not solely the history of socialist Macedonia or the history of Bulgaria or Greece. It is equally part of the broader history of Yugoslavia, encompassing both domestic socio-political developments and Yugoslavia's international relations, but as I said, particularly with Bulgaria and Greece. So the activities of socialist Macedonia among immigrant communities and its broader ideological and political position became integrated into Yugoslavia domestic and foreign policy framework, and they form part of Yugoslavia's wider policies towards immigration and its relations with neighboring states. And this research also gives us a new empirical findings that are very relevant for writing history of Yugoslavia, because usually when we write history of Yugoslavia, we lack examples from that part of Yugoslavia. So we think that actually this, our research and this project will actually improve our knowledge of history of socialist Yugoslavia. So, so this is in brief what I would like to mention from this Macedonian aspect, which are these two important points, how this explains and help us to better understand the nation building process, and also how it will help us to better understand the knowledge of our knowledge of history of socialist Yugoslavia.
Thank you, Petar, for this contribution on the Macedonian aspect. In you put the diaspora question, that is a very central one when we discuss both the Macedonian problem, but also the rise of nationalism in the Balkans. As we all know, even the nation movements, what we called national revivals in the 19th century and the late 18th century, began also by diaspora communities in Odessa, in Western Europe, in Trieste, etc. So I shall finish this presentation by referring to our collective volume that is going to be published and disseminated online also till the end of the summer. It contains 12 contributions, most of which were presented and discussed in our Skopje workshop. And now they have been, of course, reframed and reorganized on the way. 6 of the collective volumes, 12 chapters, deal with monitoring and or certification of ethnic, national, or sociopolitical identities, as well as with interaction among various aspects of such screening. Alexander Vezenkov describes the origins and the evolution of the certification of political trustworthiness and ethnic affiliation in interwar Bulgaria, while Chavdar Marinov, who is not here, explores the classification of formal and informal identities of the local population in the Bulgarian occupied territories during World War II. In my chapter, the third one in the volume, I examine the Macedonian roots of the above mentioned, earlier mentioned, certification of healthy social beliefs in Greece, as well as the evolution of the whole system of loyalty screening during the Cold War. Petar Todorov from Serbia writes about the surveillance of former Bulgarian teachers in interwar Yugoslav Macedonia. Raul Castorce, Romanian from Maynooth University, explores the taxonomies used by the Romanian state, political apparatus, and state-sponsored nationalist organizations from the 19th to the mid-20th century concerning the Aromanians, the Vlach community of expatriates in Romanian immigrants. While Alexander Tomarkin from France describes how the crypto-Don Jews, the Dönme of Thessaloniki, have been treated in Turkish historiography and political discourse, not only as an unconfessed taxonomic category, but also as an inspiration of conspiracy theories about the foundation of the Turkish Republic, conspiracy theories that are active especially today. The second part of the book deals with the work of specific apparatuses and local auxiliaries. Nikos Sigalas deciphers the 7 bureaus of the Young Turks Directorate of National Security and its taxonomy of internal threats and enemies. Kostas Fradellos looks at the spatial taxonomy used by the Greek army during the Balkan Wars through the prism of the latest special occupation companies in Macedonia, λόγοι κατοχής. Ivana Hagievska investigates the voluntary civic associations that were active in interwar Bitola as a mechanism of bodily citizens loyal to the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. And Lambros Baltsiotis questions the dominant perceptions on citizenship deprivations and repatriations of Macedonian Slav political refugees from the Greek Civil War on the basis of Greek Citizens Council's jurisprudence. The last part of the book contains 2 pioneer surveys on the intervention of the rival Balkan nation states in the Macedonian diasporas. Mostly based on Greek and Canadian archives, Yannis Papadopoulos traces the interaction between state surveillance, transnational dynamics, and the emergence of a Macedonian question in diasporic communities of North America during the first half of the 20th century. The same kind of politics, but the perspective of Yugoslav Macedonian state authorities and nation builders during the first post-war decades is investigated by Petar Todorov on the basis of previously unknown archival material from North Macedonia. After 3 years of combined research, I can say that the topic of diaspora, where the rivalry of nation states of a more or less equal strength resembled the most their pre-Balkan war struggle for Ottoman Macedonia, and the opening of various archives sheds light from conflicting perspectives on the same persons. We see this different archives and different state services shedding light on the same persons and the same expatriate communities who constituted their prey and at the same time instrumentalized, as I said, the rivalry of the nation states for their own reasons. And so we saw nationalism, a kind of diasporic nationalism backfiring and imposing politics after the 90s in all our countries. So the diaspora topic may be finally prove one of the most fruitful fields of our project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, I open the floor for questions. Feel free to ask. We will not classify your question. We will further not monitor you. So, yeah, please.
I very much agree with what you said, Petar. Macedonia was of great importance for Yugoslavia, for its foreign policy. I have been doing research on the first Yugoslavia, Macedonia in the first Yugoslavia, and that was also the case at that time and also in socialist times. I agree very much with you that the nation building, the real nation building in Macedonia started after the Second World War. But what I came across when I was studying Macedonia as part of Yugoslavia between 18 and 41 is that this national self-consciousness as Macedonian was very much developed already with some part of the population. And what came afterwards was the institutional development with all these institutions, as it usually is the case when nation building is being done with success.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. Yeah, that's why I mentioned institutional development. I think I said institutional development of the identity within this context of Yugoslavia. Of course, that there was the idea already developed and everything happened. It did not happen with one date, as some people and some politicians are saying. It did not happen with a specific date and a specific decision. So yes, that's true. I mean, and this is visible also in the archives. Of the archives, speaking about Macedonian immigration, but also and of course, as we all know, with the archives and with the documents from what happened in Macedonia, actually, in geographical region of Macedonia. So yes, for sure, that's it. Yeah. I also agree with you.
Yes, I more or less agree with you also on the fact that I think we must distinguish between two different phases of nation building. The first one is the appearance, which is not the appearance of a certain identity that is also possible identity. It's, I'm referring here to Alexander Maxwell's book, Choosing Slovakia, that we must see contingency and also felt identities. It's interesting. And this happens, I think, not just to the Macedonian one, to every kind of national identity building. The Macedonian specificity, maybe we would say, is that the same population group had before it not just two options, but more than one option that were supported by various nation states of an equal strength. So we may see more clearly in this case, I think, the political nature of nation building. That is a political choice. It's a choice. And I think that what I have seen from the Greek sources, but not also from Bulgarian, from some Macedonians, also that it's a choice by ejection. They began to be Rum Millet, then there is the Bulgar Millet. There is a series of disappointments. I mean, we can see that the early Macedonism, which is not a party consolidated like the others because it has no state behind it, but its tendencies within the rival nations parties. We see Macedonian tendencies within the Greek party, also within the Bulgarian. There is more strong. It has to do with political and social contradictions. I mean, the Bulgarian movement of the second part of the 19th century was a movement that was against the patriarchate structure, against clericalism, against authoritarian structures of the Mileti Room, and then on the ethnic, politicizing the ethnic differentiation of Slav-speaking population. Then, when they arrive and they have the exarchate structure, instead of this structure imitates the patriarchate. So they have the bishops and this domination by the bishops, and they have the domination by a foreign apparatus that comes in the schools. So there is this disappointment that produces Macedonism within the Bulgarian party. Within the Greek party, we have this contradiction about linguistic assimilation that creates its own contradictions. At the same time, we have also this theory about Macedonian Slavs being the descendants of ancient Macedonians, promoted by the Greek propaganda. We had this even false prophecies of Alexander the Great written in Macedonian Slav with Greek letters and disseminated by the Greek apparatus. Okay, so the people believed at the end that they were descendants of ancient Macedonians. It's something that backfires. Always this backfires. We see how nationalism in the diaspora backfired, creating the Vemero story in Macedonia, creating the pan-Macedonian things in Greece. So it's interesting to see this interaction. But I think, to finish with that, the Macedonian, the first is the appearance of the identity as a tendency. The second one is state building. When is homogenizing like this Peasant into Frenches, written by this seminal work by Eugene Weber, Peasant. So how the state creates at the end an homogeneous national community.
Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah, yes. Okay, thank you very much. A super interesting project. Congratulations. Really impressive also with this cooperation, this whole regional cooperation. I have one question. I was very much impressed by the certificates of healthy social beliefs. Could you please tell a little bit, like, where did the idea come from? Did they copy some other, I don't know, Eastern or other European model? Was it kind of an autochthonous invention? And how was it? How were these certificates basically handed out? Maybe was there corruption involved? Because I mean, it basically controlled in certain areas almost all life chances. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for your question. This certificate was firstly imposed by law in 1938. I mean, there have been some kind of influences from Third Reich, maybe, because the Greek dictatorship from Metaxas regime at the time had his security service, had cooperation with the German services, but in a more wide outside, it's a more permanent institution, I mean outside the dictatorship, during constitutional regimes too, and democratic ostensibly at least. It was imposed during the Civil War, and it was, the model was mostly American loyalty screening procedures. But what I discovered was that there was also an indigenous prehistory that had to do with the Macedonian question. That means when somebody wanted to travel in Greece, there was provided by the by bishopric or by the Greek armed bands, or with such a certificate saying he's a loyal, he's a patriotist, he's a pro-Greek, he's one of our people. Initially it was more spontaneous and more, there was a variation in the form. Around 1910, this was centralized and more codified by the Greek Foreign Ministry, saying, and also there was a kind of special wording. If he says he's ours, he means he's now ours. If he's always ours, okay, he's more ours. If he's one of our main ours, it's okay. And the person's treatment in Greece when he came as an immigrant, we could have this Pechalbari coming from a traditional, seasonal or immigration or for other reasons. I have found in the Bulgarian archives similar kind of screening, not so systematic, but my research was not so systematic. Alexander Vezenkov has seen that there is this certificate of trustworthiness that, as I remember, it begins in Bulgaria as that he's not over-indebted, it's this kind of things, provided by the mayors, and then this is slowly transformed into a political, a certificate of political control, and he believes, I think he's right, that it's also a Russian, there is a Russian inspiration in that part of the Balkans. But Macedonian question also there plays, I think, a crucial role in this transformation of what is a good citizen to what is a good, politically good citizen to be trusted politically and nationally. This certificate was, of course, during the Cold Wars, it was a very crucial component. It was the pillar of the post-war repressive state in Greece. More than police, and it was provided by the security service. And it was also a screening, and you could decolorize yourself by making some compromise with the police. It's a very crucial thing. My first part of the work, my work on this, will be seen in the book, in the collective volume. Would you like to add something about that?
Yeah, of course, we were not able to reconstruct the whole history of this type of documents in the European context, but certainly examples existed in Western and Central Europe. And I think that the earliest one equivalent I found was the Certificat de Civisme at the time of the French Revolution. There was no direct connection, or we were not able to find direct influence in the establishment of these practices in the individual Balkan countries. But equivalents, more or less similar, exist in Central and Western Europe, and in Russia.
Putting together this great research project and bringing different historical expertise together. So I'm looking very much forward to the book. You've mentioned the micro-historical approach, and I wanted to ask you if you have encountered, or how do you deal with subversive practices? So people who openly or not openly opposed these attempts of the authoritarian regimes to nationally identify? Or would you say the pressure was just too high, so that at one point or another the people just had to identify as a Greek or a Macedonian or Bulgarian or whatever? So what about, let's say, the private life, the individual life, having on the one hand the certificate, on the other side, doing your everyday business, and maybe there are examples not only in the diaspora, because this is another question, but in Macedonia itself. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, there is this discrepancy between the official loyalty and the everyday life that's different. Is a very interesting part of our topic. Of course, it's not very easy always to discover this, but here you can see. Okay, I have seen Macedonian descendants even from the Ottoman times. Maybe it's Ottoman, not so Macedonian, or universal, you may say, I guess. It's not some specificity. I remember the memories of, in two times, of at least two Bulgarian teachers, describing how they were forced as students in Bulgarian schools in Macedonia, before the Eastern Crisis, to laud the Sultan. I think one is Simeon Radev in Ranim Smomeni, and the other one was one from the Pirin region, saying that Radev says, for example, that his father said, okay, you shall shout, long live the Sultan, and you think, long live the Russian Tsar. This is, okay, this is a way to treat with submission and to organize, okay. I would say that this is also, okay, not the more positive thing as things evolve in the evolution of things, because people have been repressed when things change. Okay, in Greek Macedonia, those people who were the ultra-Greek nationalists, or some of them, not all of them, but a part of the ultra-Greek nationalists up to the end of, to the collapse of the Greek front in the Second World War, became in one day ultra-Bulgarian nationalists. There are certain, in the macro level, you see many people of this kind of change of identities. This guy whose brother was renamed under Metaxas, voluntary from Boris to Pericles. He was the guy of the Greek police in Florina city. He became the guy of the Bulgarian propaganda under the, okay, he was, and he began again a Greek nationalist. He was cleared after the war, while others, those who had take part in the resistance as minority fighters, was ethnic Greek fighters of the resistance, were persecuted very harshly. He was, again, a man of the state. And this we can see also in other places. For example, in Greek Thrace, there was a Circassian guy who came from Anatolia, and he was a very Greek nationalist, of course, in the Pomak villages. And then, during the Bulgarian occupation, he was a Bulgarian nationalist. In 1945, the Greek school inspector makes in his report of what happened in the early years, say, oh, this guy must have been a Bulgarian agent since the intercourse. But after that, he's the leader of the Greek Muslims against the pro-Turkish element within the minority. So, you know, people of every time and every regime. But so in the macro history, you see both the hidden transcripts of resistance and also the data on this kind of always with the regime. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that was not precisely our aim, but there are such a lot of examples. One that is probably the most striking. It's the case of exactly Muslims living in Bulgaria, which were forced to take Bulgarian names. So many of them choose either names that remind Turkish names like Deniz or Esen and like that, and many choose Russian names.
And again, they were forced to change their names, but they choose names that differentiate them from the majority. So that was really an inventive form of reaction and opposition to the pressure.
Mislim da smo iscrpili ovu temu i da možemo nastaviti nakon raspravu, možemo nastaviti za vrijeme ručka, a program kreće u 14 sati i 30 minuta u ovoj sali, dakle ne idemo na Vraca, nego se vidimo ovdje sa pričom o partizanskoj čitanci.